And as soon as I took the different lens, instead of that child is acting out, that child is misbehaving, that child is not doing what I've asked, I've taken that step back and thought, what does this part want?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Risa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us again. I'm so excited for today's episode. We have Andi joining us today. Hi, Andi. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I am so excited for your recipe and your story. But before we get started, for anybody listening who doesn't know you, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, so I live in Canada where it's pretty cold here right now. And a long time ago, when my son was actually first born, he was born in with all the burnout signs because I'd been in burnout and he was struggling with just so much going on with his body. And my mama bear came out, and that led me to being a sleep and stress coach. And got us out of burnout, but he still was having a lot of big emotions. At that time, though, I moved all the sleep and stress coaching to first responders. And so I was working with them for, all through the pandemic, everything until a couple of years ago, because after the pandemic, I had to pull him from school because his outbursts were so bad. And I was like, how does his brain work? What do I do? Like, what's going on? All these sleep and stress techniques that I use with responders to get them back from medical leave back on, like, they're not like, it's still not stopping the outburst. So I had to dive into all of these other pieces of the puzzle. And that dove me into being an executive functioning coach. And through my journey with responders too, I became a trauma informed coach. So I am a sleep and stress coach, trauma informed coach, and an executive functioning coach who now works with kids with big emotions.
Okay, so lots of hats that you've had throughout your journey, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I mean, we do what we need to do for our kids. So I'm like diving into the research and studying and certifying and whatever I could do. Yeah. Mhm.
Wonderful. And so you have two children?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. What are their ages?
They are 11 and 13, two boys.
Okay. Wow, you've got your hands full for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, they're amazing. So I homeschool both of them as well while I run my business. So,
Wow. Okay. So for any of your services, this is a great segue into our shameless plug section. So if someone's interested in your services or connecting with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say to start off listening to my podcast, which I'm going to be having you on soon, which I'm very excited about. So that's Kids with Big Emotions podcast. And then everything else, I work one on one. I have a group, it's a support circle for
Okay.
parents as well, where other parents with kids with big emotions are in there and just help them navigate through all of the sleep, stress, all of the, executive fund, all of the different struggles that their kids are having, and just help them all navigate through that in a support circle. So all of that, the links are all on my podcast. So if you just go to Kids with Big Emotions or andiclark.com, which is ANDICLARK.com. So andiclark.com will have everything on it as well. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And as usual, we will link all of those wonderful links and resources down in our show notes, so make sure to check those out. Um, as far as your podcast, where can folks find that? Is that on particular platforming services?
It's everywhere. It's on YouTube. It's on like everything, Spotify, Amazon, Podbean. Yeah, everywhere. Like on Apple. It's on all different channels. We're almost hitting 1,000 or 100 episodes, not 1,000. I wish. We're almost at 100 episodes. So yeah, it's great.
Wow.
Mhm.
Congratulations. And that's so awesome. And it sounds like it's super accessible. So make sure to check that out as well. And I'm excited to be a guest and chat a little bit more on that side too. Okay, so let's dive into your story. But before we do that, what recipe are you sharing with parents today, and why did you choose this one?
Yeah, so this is a sweet potato chickpea curry. We do sometimes add chicken into it.
Okay.
And I love this recipe because the thing that's time consuming is actually making the sweet potatoes, but I can do those in the morning while my kids are like, while we're doing breakfast or while we're having lunch. I can throw them in the toaster oven and leave them and then put the rest together quickly later. So I love that I can kind of do it in two parts and do the other part quick. I'll sometimes make a huge batch as well, and then we'll freeze a bunch of it. So it makes quick meals after, and my kids love it. And it fills them up, which for boys, I don't know if you're going through a growth spurt, filling them up is amazing. So I just love that. Like once you've got the sweet potatoes done, the rest is quick and easy and freezes so well.
Wonderful. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So because of the nature of our of the podcast, I did the sweet potatoes ahead of time too. And you're absolutely right, to be able to kind of do that, get that out of the way, that makes a ton of sense, especially when we're talking about parents who sometimes, having lots of time is not really a luxury we get to have. And so I love that idea, and being able to kind of piece it out like that and just meet whatever your need is as far as time constraints. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
Okay, so tell me what steps I have the sweet potatoes ahead of time that I baked, and then I mixed them together with the coconut milk and the vegetable broth. Am
Mhm.
I remembering that correctly?
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. So tell me now, what are the steps? What do I do while we chat? And then I'll get going and then we'll jump into your story.
Yeah. So you have all the spices. So you'll need to chop ginger and garlic.
Okay.
And then once you have those chopped, what you're going to start to do is you're going to heat your pan and start off with the cumin and the coriander seeds and toast them just till they're fragrant, like just a little bit. It's not a long, very quick. And then you add in, oh, you chopped an onion as well. So then you add in the onion, turmeric, garam masala, and you'll saute that until the onions get translucent. And then you add in, if you do choose, a bit of chili pepper along with the ginger and garlic. We don't. I have one son that does not like spicy and one that likes. So the one adds hot sauce after, and the other one keeps it mild. So the all the other spices, nothing is spicy hot. They're spicy flavor. So you can keep those. And then you saute those. Once they're done, you add the chickpeas that you've already drained.
Okay.
Add in the chickpeas, saute them 2, 3 minutes just to get some of the flavor and stuff in them. And then you pour that sweet potato mixture, which the sweet potato mixture should be a little bit like liquidy, a little like not, don't want it hard like mashed potatoes. You want them a little, so it's like a very thick stew kind of thing. If it's too thick, it'll burn on the bottom. And all you do is add the tomato paste into it. I'll add cilantro into it and some spinach. If my kids, when they were younger, I used to blend the spinach and the cilantro with the with the sweet potatoes. So they see the pieces, but now they're fine with pieces of green in it. And then you
Mhm.
just heat it up. That's it.
Wonderful. And I love that little, tip if your kids are, like you said, maybe not liking the idea of eating the veggies, that we can kind of sneak it in there as well. So perfect tip. I can do all those things while we chat. And I'd love to know more. I know you kind of gave us a little bit of a sneak peek as far as some of the challenges that your family kind of faced that brought you into what you're doing today. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey and kind of how did that come about? I imagine, as you were saying, you'd been coaching and helping folks, and then to kind of have it hit really close to home was certainly, kind of a different challenge that presented. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So do you want me to hit on both the burnout and then having to pull them and learning the like the pulling out, or want me to go more to when I had to really pull them out of school?
If the burnout is a at play as far as your parenting story. I think that many parents could absolutely relate to that. So we'd love to
So,
hear
yeah,
that.
that's the thing is that I mean, I've been in the health and wellness industry for 30 years, coaching for 30 years. And so exercise, nutrition, sleep, all those things were like I was doing them all and I still burnt out. Right. So
Okay.
that's where it's fascinating that it really was having to change that mindset of, okay, other things are going on. And when you're in burnout, quite often you start getting gut issues and you might get skin issues and you get moody and your husband might walk in the room and he smiles at you the wrong way and you're like upset at him that he doesn't know which end is up sometimes
Yeah.
because you can't your stress hormone is the one that manages your ability to handle stressors and your energy. And when it's crashing, you can't handle stressors. So everything just becomes a fire. You struggle to handle your kids. You're just pushing from like the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed. Like your battery doesn't charge at night. So
Yeah.
it was one thing when it was happening to me, and I was going to my doctor and I was saying, I'm really tired, stuff's going on. And they're saying, well, your tests are coming back okay. That was one thing. But when we got to the next step where my son was born, and his skin was the worst case of eczema the doctor had ever seen. And then we couldn't find, like, he ended up on this hyperallergenic formula. Like, I was gluten and dairy free. I was like, everything I ate, like, I ate so clean, and he still couldn't handle like projectile vomits that we had to switch to this hypoallergenic formula that was prescription based. It was just like gut issues, skin, all these things. And then once he was kind of talking a little bit like a year and a half, 2 years. And he used to say, I'm so sad. I'm so sad. Or after he would eat certain things, like rage would come, not even just anger or tantrum, would be like rage, hitting things, like full on, like instant. He'd eat it and you'd see this reaction in him. I'm like, okay, this is not just me, this is my son as well. So going to gastroenterologist, pediatric gastroenterologist, pediatric allergists. And I remember I was working with a naturopath at the time too. And the pediatric gastroenterologist had said that, oh, most allergies are never fixed. And there's no such thing as like leaky gut or something like that for gut issues. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Like I've been told this for years and have been believing this for myself, but when nothing else that you're saying is able to help my son, I'm going this other route. So I started studying and learning and researching all about gut issues, all about how like affects your hormones. And it was just, I just felt so bad for him because I had struggled for so many years with doctors telling me that this was just the norm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just normal for a parent to be pushing through every single day. It's just normal for you to like be struggling. And I'm like, this is not normal for a baby to be born like this. This is not normal. And it had to take me to that point.
And
Mhm.
gosh, to kind of hear all of that, and like you said, that it sounds like, if I heard you correctly, that you'd almost kind of this conditioning, right? That it's just you, this is normal. So you just kind of have to put up with it. You just have to deal with it because this is what it is. And I imagine just like hearing that, just kind of, I mean, as I was listening to kind of feelings and the thoughts that are popping up in my head of just like this hopelessness and that's just like really lonely and kind of, gosh, that really stings. Like, what?
Yeah. I remember just thinking to myself, okay, I'm a personal trainer and I can't work out. Like, like and it's just, this is just going to have to be my life because this must be in my head. I kept thinking this must be in my head because the doctors just always, my cortisol would come back really low, but it wasn't in disease state yet. So they're like, we'll keep an eye. You're not there. You have signs of Addison's disease, which is like crazy, crazy low, 2.5% of cortisol, but you're 10% cortisol. So you're not there yet. And I remember coming to the doctor's office and just thinking, like, okay, I'm 10% cortisol on this test, but I'm not in a disease state yet. And I was so upset and so frustrated. And I felt so alone. And like, this is just crazy. And it was only that I realized and really understood the difference between our medical system is triage reactive medicine for disease, and we need them. we need them. They have a role, they have a place, but they're not preventative medicine. And I wasn't in a disease state yet. So their training couldn't help them. So I needed to go to that preventative side. And at the moment too, like I'm finally working with a gut specialist who she's a lead researcher for a university and a college. Sorry, you guys say college in the States. So she's a lead researcher in the States on gut that has gastroenterologists working under her, and she's a naturopath. So she has helped me with the wording I needed to use, that I'm finally being heard by my gastro to get to work with. So the holistic side's working with the medical.
Mm-hmm.
But this is such a struggle for so many people too, where we go to our doctor and we expect they're going to help us, but we're
Yeah.
not within their scope of where their training hits. But we've been trained to believe that they should be able to help us
Mm-hmm.
through before we're in disease state, but it's not what their training is.
Well, and like you said, you had to kind of get the inside scoop on what words to say or, how to say it in order to get them to listen. I mean, that's not common knowledge that everyone
Mhm.
has accessible. And so you're absolutely right. If you're going in, just kind of looking to these professionals to kind of be able to support you in you saying, hey, something's wrong. And you don't have the code, you haven't cracked the code to be able to get them to listen. Like, yes, I absolutely can imagine how frustrating that would be. And then to, like you said, to see then your child kind of coming up that against that same wall, like where, I don't know about you, but I would definitely, my mama bear mode would be in like, ultimate extreme level. I'd be like, no.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And so when it was happening to my son, I was diving so deep and listening to every podcast. And finally, this one podcast listed. So I had some slightly different symptoms than him,
Okay.
some similar. And I listened to a podcast one day that listed all of our symptoms together and started talking about it as far as like the adrenals, the way our stress system and stuff. And I
Mhm.
remember sitting on the floor crying and being like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. It's not in my head.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that's when I'm like, I'm so deep into researching and learning and training and studying and courses. And yeah, it was unbelievable that when my son was 6 years old, we went back to the doctor and the doctor's going over his skin and going, it's gone. There's no eczema anywhere. He's like, he had the worst eczema that I have ever seen in a baby. He's like, and it's gone. He goes, I can see some scars, but it's gone. And I remember
Wow.
there were times where like I had to build him sleeves when he was a baby because he used to scratch his wrists open in his sleep and come to me at 2 in the morning going, Mommy, bleeding, help. And
Mhm.
I'd like sitting there at 2 in the morning just bandaging this kid's wrists and he'd go, thank
Yeah.
you. And then go right back to bed. Like that was just
Wow.
normal for him.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just, it's, and I'm like, no, this isn't normal. This is not in your head. This is truly happening. And we need to dive down into this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to kind of have someone all of a sudden validate, like you said, that this, you're not alone and it's not something that's just kind of made up. Oh, I mean, it's so powerful. And I think that's part of, I mean, I can just speak for myself. Part of the reason why I was so passionate about wanting to even start a podcast like this, because so much of just what I've heard from other parents, from my own experiences, it is like when you are sitting there kind of keeping it to yourself because for whatever reason, and then it gets really lonely. You don't hear stories that sound like yours. So then it just really furthers that narrative of like, it must just be something that's wrong with me or, a me thing.
Yeah. 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 It was, you go through all these fields too, because once you realize that there actually is something going on, you go through the anger. You also go through like the grief, like you go through all those stages, right? Like, of it's been so long, how many years since I've been struggling and no one could help me. And you get angry. And then you're like, nope, I'm picking up my socks and putting my big girl pants on. I'm going to fix this. And yeah, it's just fascinating all of the feels that you go through. And then, okay, now I'm alone in this fight. And then you realize others are fighting this fight. And you're like, have this community. And you're like, wow, okay, you know, there's others too. And, and yeah, it's just, it can be so, so lonely.
Ah.
So tell me then, you're fighting this fight. You get some of the kind of physical manifestations where your child kind of finding some solutions. And then you mentioned, then you kind of had another growing pain as he continues to grow and, that led you into the emotion side. Can you say more about that journey and kind of how did that come about?
Yeah. So we were able to help with the physical side, but that anger was still always there. And the perfectionism and the anxiety and the not liking change. And when he started going to school, oh, he hated it right from day one. Like day one, he hated being in school. And he would cry going to school, and it was just such anxiety. And I had a neighbor ended up taking him to school. And so because he was a bit better going to school, but it was still bad. And then we had the
About how
pandemic
old
hit.
was he at this point?
Well, that was kindergarten and grade one. And then I think the pandemic hit. So we were
Okay.
off. So all of grade two, part of grade one, and all of grade two was at home.
Okay.
And then when he went back, it was just like still the same thing. And it was like, it was too loud, too many noises, just all kinds of stuff. And he was bored. He was just super bored. And the teacher was like, I don't know what to do with him. So I thought his brother was in gifted. And
Okay.
I thought, okay, once, the testing happens in grade three here, once he does the testing, he'll get into gifted. We'll get him out of this school where he doesn't really like it and he'll be challenged and all of that stuff.
Okay.
And he didn't get into gifted. I was like, whoa, this kid's smarter than his brother, like way smarter than his brother. I'm like,
Yeah.
how did he not get into gifted? I didn't understand.
Okay.
And so the teacher was phenomenal that year, though. He was amazing. He didn't know what else to do with my son, like schoolwork wise. And so my son read books most of the day in class. And we had like a code word. So and if he would explode or have explosions in school, the teacher would call me or call me just before an explosion would happen to go and get him. And this was happening like 3, 4 times a week. So
Oh,
eventually
wow.
I started taking him out Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he just needed quiet. He needed to downregulate. And he was really good the whole entire day. I could go upstairs and work in the office, and he'd spend the whole day and he was fine, but he still struggled sometimes on Fridays to still be in school, and I'd still get calls from the teacher. And then the school would only deal with it because I went in and I'm like, well, he's bored as well. And they're like, but he didn't get into gifted. And I'm like, but he's bored and he's having outbursts. So they go, oh, outbursts. Okay, let's work with him when he's in the red. And I'm thinking, but part of why he's in the red is that he's bored.
Mm.
And we also didn't understand as well that he'd been masking what at that point too I ended up thinking was a learning disability,
Okay.
but which a lot of these kids, and that's why he didn't pass the gifted screening, was because so he was 99.9% in every subject for every
Mhm.
kid his age, but it was the spatial that he didn't pass. And the
Okay.
spatial, he got 96% out of all the kids and not 98.
Okay.
So he didn't pass. And so if we fast forward to all of my learning, so we ended up doing psycho at a valve and learning, and they said he had a disability in learning disability in written expression, where apparently, so this is dysgraphia, which falls under the dyslexia and the dyscalculia bucket.
Hmm.
And dysgraphia is struggling to write by hand, get your thoughts on paper. And so also like do grammar, punctuation, all of those things.
Okay.
And so if we fast forward to me trying to figure out how does his brain work? Like once I brought him home, I realized he can't handle more than one instruction at a time.
Hmm.
Can't write out the answers to math, which he tested in grade three, grade eight level math, but he could not even write down how he got the answers for grade three math on
Wow.
paper. So he can do all this in his head, but he can't get the stuff on paper.
Hmm.
That was
And
causing outbursts.
yeah, and I'm so curious if it's okay with you. I heard you mention that he was masking a lot. And so for any listener who's who is listening and maybe doesn't know what that looks like, because I think that sometimes that's very much a big culprit for something like this getting missed. Can you say a little bit more about, at least in your experience, what is masking? How did it present for your child and kind of your experience as well? That would be amazing.
Yeah. So being that he was in school reading full chapter books, being that he could do dictation words like at college level. So when he was asked to write something down, like, hey, write a paragraph about this, do that, he'd write like one sentence. And they'd look at him and go, hey, you could write more on this. He's like, I don't want to.
Mm.
All he would say is, I don't want to, like calmly, never. And they would be like, but you should. He goes, no, I'm not going to do it. And it was like, there was no, he didn't fight with them. He wouldn't reason with them. He wouldn't let them do anything. He just told them no. And then he'd eventually start saying, it's too easy. And so they were like, well, I can't challenge this kid. So what am I supposed to do? I've got 30 other kids in the class. So they just let him be and go back to read his book. And same thing with his math. The teacher knew that he could do math at such a high level in his head
Mhm.
that they just didn't argue with him about being able to get it on paper.
Okay.
And then, and now that I see all this, I would be curious to go back to that classroom and wonder if shortly after the teacher asked him this, did he have an outburst and yell at another kid?
Okay. And why do you say that?
Because he would have been sitting there knowing that he could not do it, knowing that his brain was different. And he would have been, because, and this is the thing, I don't like the term gifted, because gifted often means that a kid can academically do things, but their brain works different. And they often have a lot of social or different struggles in the way that they perceive things, in the traumas they have, all of these things. So from a young age he could always do things, and then all of a sudden in school he was being asked to do something he couldn't do, and a
Mm.
trauma can kick in, right? Something's being asked of you too soon, too fast, too much, and too, I can't remember the other one, but those create traumas. And when we start diving into the way their brains work, they have a bucket only for mistakes are bad. So he would get pissed if he slightly was outside the line in coloring.
Mm.
And even drawing a circle or drawing his letters, they weren't perfect. It wasn't a perfect S or a perfect P. And I'm thinking your writing's way better than mine, but but it wasn't perfect. So it wasn't bad. So he would even often rip up his artwork, or he would rip up his paper, or he wouldn't
Oh.
do what they're asking him to do. So
Hmm.
he'd have anger and outbursts because he's sitting there thinking that he's then a failure. He's been bad. And they get this, like, it's just fascinating when you start talking to these kids and with perfectionism and fear of making mistakes, and you start realizing every single thing that they do wrong, they put in that I'm a bad person bucket and I've done wrong bucket, instead of what they all say, oh, just move them to the growth mindset. And there's other steps that have to happen before they're ready and able to do that.
Absolutely. And I think what I find, at least, and I don't know if this is true for you, is that growth mindset, first of all, it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
And then also it doesn't moving to a growth mindset doesn't necessarily all of a sudden give children a cognitive ability that developmentally they're not quite there yet. They don't, like you said, be able to kind of distinguish the gray. Right now, it is all very black and white. And so it is either I did amazing, or like you said, I'm a failure and this is somehow, on me, something that a shortcoming. And so, yes, we can give them skills and they might be able to kind of conceptually like, okay, that makes sense, but doesn't always necessarily mean that their brain is able to get there and get there consistently for
Mm-hmm.
all these challenges that they're reaching on a daily basis that are challenging that construct of themselves. Is that,
Yeah. And
go for it. I
so
was just gonna say, is that similar to kind of your experience at all?
yeah, and it's fascinating because you made me think back to the psychoeval, and I never actually linked this before. But when we did the psychoeval, she said that he has a learning disability of written expression and black and white thinking. And I remember her telling us that's never going to change. You can't fix that. And I remember there was so many things about that psychoeval that I was just like in my mind thinking, I'm gonna figure out a way, you know? And it's just been so fascinating to go, if like now to think back, because I hadn't. And yeah, that black and white thinking, mistakes are bad, everything. You have to say things this way. This is how this is done. Like, so for rules in a game or losing, right? Losing in a game is like, oh, yeah, he just could not handle that. And it's been so much work in understanding black and white thinking, understanding cognitive flexibility, and working with him that, I mean, he still has some more work to do on it, but oh my gosh, like he laughs at himself sometimes when he makes mistakes now, and he'll actually purposely do things that are silly or like being a kid that he wouldn't do before because that will look bad, or that's not how this is done, or somebody might laugh at me. And it's just been fascinating seeing the change in him in, yeah, with mistakes and being able to make those mistakes and starting to now, like, I had to pull off, even though academically he was ahead in homeschooling, I have had to pull off of all of that because I need to work at a step that he's cognitively ready for, as far as working with him at being able to do more than one step at a time, working at him on something that maybe he doesn't actually know how to answer and being okay with that. So I've been working more on the all of that side of things, the executive functioning side of things with him, and not focusing at all on the academic. And it's been like unbelievable. And the fascinating thing is I have not had him write anything. I have not touched that learning disability of written expression. And I found in his Google Drive a 2-chapter story that I thought he copied from somebody that was so good. Amazing grammar, amazing punctuation, better than mine. And like, it was such an amazing story written out. And I asked him where he got it from. He's like, I wrote that. And that was because we'd worked on all of the where all of the things that were stopping him from being able to pause and think about, okay, what do I need to do for sentence structure here? What do I need to do? I need to paragraphs. Like, before, his brain was going so fast,
Mm.
he couldn't stop. He couldn't pause. He couldn't self monitor himself to notice any mistakes. He couldn't self correct himself. And also, too, he would be so hard on himself about self correcting, anyways, that would have sent him in a tailspin before he'd even start adding grammar and punctuation in there.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like by giving him that opportunity to not have that pressure to fit into a box that, we're trying to cram everybody else into, he was able to kind of on his own find his way there. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, he's finding his way. He still doesn't know what subjects he likes. He still doesn't know what interests him other than Pokemon and Minecraft. But,
Yes.
it's like, in subject wise, like he does seem to like history, but he's very cautious about telling me that he likes history because I think he's worried in the back of his mind that I'll give him stuff that he won't understand, or that will be too hard, or that will just hurt his brain. And so I'll just sometimes just hand him some videos, or just hand him there's so many things you can do homeschooling wise that work different parts of his brain. There's some great, video games that are all history. that I'd be like, hey, why don't you try this game? And I have to start him off on the steps because there's still that piece sometimes that I think it's a trauma from before of starting things and getting that initiation on things. So, which is all executive functioning still too, and working with the traumas. But there's so many pieces to that puzzle, right? And the I've learned executive functioning, who I studied under to become a coach, is through Tara Sumner, who's an SLP. And I do remember when she said that she discovered a long time ago that dysgraphia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, well, not all of it, some of dyscalculia is a bit different, but some of it is executive functioning.
Mm.
It's actually executive functioning struggles that she has been able to work with kids with all of these and been able to help them um, be able to get past them
Yeah.
because they're actually executive functioning, but our school system tends to put them under a learning disability, and they're only looking at the way that they academically do things, and they're not looking at the way that the brain cognitively thinks and processes, perception and where their attention is when they're doing these letters and what they're inhibiting, and if they can self-monitor and if they can self-correct. If they can't do those things, then they are going to
Mm.
constantly spell things backwards and mix up their letters and not be able to work on those things. You have to figure out which parts is it their nonverbal working memory, like which parts of it is causing them to not be able to write all their letters.
Yeah. And I imagine with the masking that you mentioned, that just further complicates, especially if we're talking about folks who aren't paying attention or even know what masking is, that easily could get missed in those ways. And so then we're going, oh, well, then you don't fit this diagnosis. So it must not be it. And then
Mm-hmm.
let's move on and just missing it in that way.
That as well. And our teachers, as they're amazing. I love teachers. They're not taught about executive functioning. They're taught the academic side, how somebody should learn if their executive functioning system is completely intact. If their executive functioning is running the way that it is, then they should be able to do the stuff that like the teachers are being taught. They're not
Mm.
taught about executive functioning. So
Yeah.
Tara Sumner is phenomenal. She is booked until like 2026 to speak in schools. There's some schools that have hired her to teach all of their teachers. It's slowly coming where teachers are learning about it and teachers are coming on board with it.
Mm.
But most teachers aren't aware of it, which is, as I was saying, like the support circle that I have, like I'll start teaching parents how to, in a way that most teachers, not all, will be open to hearing about it in order to be able to help and support their child
Yeah.
um, in there, because this is one of the big gaps we have is teachers want to help the child, but they don't understand the executive functioning side of it and how to support it.
Mm.
And so that's when too they may miss. So with my son, they missed it more because they didn't understand the executive functioning side. And none of them, when I went back and told them about dysgraphia, none of them had known about dysgraphia. His teacher the year before, his teacher this year, like that year, none of them had heard about dysgraphia. I went to a couple of other teachers my other son had, and none of them had heard of it. So
Wow.
there's how can they learn everything, especially when their kids are filled with, 30 kids in a class? How can they have any bandwidth to even go and take an extra course and certification like for a year?
100%. Yeah.
So I think too, for him, he was masking, and they also didn't understand enough about what was going on that they weren't able to ask the right questions
Mm.
to figure it out either.
Yeah. I'm really curious for you, now going to the parent side and kind of getting in your brain a little bit. I'm curious about what was going on for you upstairs in your own brain, kind of seeing your child struggling through this, getting those phone calls, and just not having a lot of answers at that point in time on how do I support my kid? Can you say a little bit more about that piece of it?
It was so hard, so lonely. Like we talked before about that burnout piece being lonely.
Mm.
This was where I was led to believe that my son was the only one in this school that was having outbursts or having struggles like this, that like didn't get into gifted, but they wouldn't help him now that he didn't get into gifted. And I felt like I was the only one. And going through this later, like there actually ended up being a gifted group in our neighborhood, in our zone, in our school zone, our area. And I started realizing that there were a lot of other kids that were also struggling with the same thing. And that the school system truly did not understand it. And the gifted programs don't understand it either. Like gifted here is grade level. So they don't go above grade level for anything. And they don't understand all the executive functioning and learning disabilities that all these kids have too when they are smarter. So it was super lonely. And then it was very frustrating when I found out, well, just being told by the school all the time, the guidance counselor would only ever call me or wanted me to meet her in person, would never, ever reply to anything in email. So nothing was on record. And she would pretty much never ask me what was truly going on with my son, would just tell me what needed to happen. And in my mind, I'm like, you don't understand my child at all. So they hadn't spent any time to even get to know him. And it was very frustrating. Once I got into these other Facebook groups and stuff, and I realized, oh, this isn't only my son. There are tons of kids out there. And then there's tons of 2E. So it's twice exceptional, which means they're academically ahead, but they usually have another struggle. So dysgraphia, dyslexia, ADHD, autism, auditory processing disorder, like anything, like when these kids are struggling to, get their morning routine, get themselves out the door. They can't like remember to bring anything home from school. They can't remember to hand in their homework or get their assignments done on time. All of these things. I'm realizing, oh, there's tons of these kids out there. And so you start going, okay, I'm not lonely anymore, but then they're all struggling too. And you're like, oh, but they're all struggling too. And now that I understand about the executive functioning piece, as I read, like I want to go in there all day and just being like, oh my gosh, have you dove into executive functioning? Like you could, what you just said, that's this piece of executive functioning, and that's this one and this one and this one. And these all make sense. And I just want to shout it out there. And I want to reply to everyone and give them a hug and being like, there's actually a reason behind this.
Wow. Yeah. And it sounds like in that just, maybe even providing not only that normalization that you're not alone, but just a validation that there's something going on there. It's not just all kind of made up or something that you have to kind of survive in the sense that there's something wrong, but rather that, hey, it just means that maybe we've got to get a little bit more creative on how we're supporting these children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing, is the way that I've been taught through Tara is they're easy things. How do I explain this? As a parent, you're still, sometimes it's frustrating and there's simple things, but you have to do them over and over again, repeating them over and over. You have to support them, and you really have to lower what your expectations are. Like, okay, so this kid can read chapter books, but he can't write on paper. We need to work on these things. Or he thinks every mistake is really bad. How do we come in with this? Like, we have to build up their cognitive flexibility on that. We have to build up this other file for them to understand not everything is bad. And how do we do that? Especially in like a schooling system where there's usually consequences or like points on a test and you need to get a certain point, right? Like in homeschooling with my kids, I tell them that tests are for us to know what else we could do and work on, or where we should actually focus next. It's not to test if you failed at learning something. So we'll test at the beginning and go, okay, do this test and let's see where we need to focus. You're not supposed to get all the answers on this. I don't want you to, so that we know what we should do this semester,
Yeah, and I love that reframe because I think so much of the society is you look at tests, and one of the reasons, at least in my experience, why test anxiety is a real thing is because there is that narrative that I'm going in there and I this is going to determine me, something about me and whether or not I'm succeeding in some way or if I'm failing in some way. And there is, going back to that black and white thinking, right? So much of that narrative I find that is perpetuated when we think about tests is going into that black and white. And that's what's being perpetuated. And so I love that reframe of that this test is an opportunity for me as your teacher, as your educator to learn what are areas that I could be better in supporting you and helping you to
Mhm.
grow.
Yeah, right. And there's one thing too that Tara has a bunch of teachers that do take her course, and there is one teacher that at the end of the school day, every single day, they ask the kids, "What did I do well in today, and what do I need help in, or what could I work on more?"
Right?
And she asked them that every day, and it was fascinating because she said the change in the kids over time, first off, it really helped her see when she had kids in her class, they couldn't even notice the mistakes they were making. So she's like, oh, I need to work on actually their is that self monitoring? Yeah, they need to learn how to self monitor themselves to know even where they're weak or strong in.
Hmm.
And because they didn't even know that they were weak in something, right? And that they need to work on it. And so she'd
Okay.
work on that with them. And what she found is over time, kids started coming up to her during their free time and going, can I work on this or can I work on that? And it was the thing that they knew that they needed to work on. And they
Hmm.
weren't seeing it as a negative anymore when every single day they had to notice, they got to acknowledge what they did well and what
Yes.
could I do more work on? What could I use some help with?
Hmm.
And it's just asking those two questions every single day in a classroom can give a teacher so much insight too,
Yes.
especially with the black and white thinking and the not being able to notice your mistakes, like so many different things, if they know
Hmm.
what to look for from those two simple questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love, again, one of the other things we mentioned earlier was that growth mindset, that's a wonderful way to nurture that and really work out that muscle in the brain of being able to take a look at those areas that maybe we do could use some extra growth in and could use some developing and like you said, instead of it being a all or nothing about who you are as a character and who you are as a person, that it's, hey, areas of growth is normal for everybody. And we all have areas that we could, bump up and really improve. And so that's okay. That's actually something that we're all working on. It might look a little bit different, what one person is working on versus the other. And that's totally okay. And being able to kind of allow that space for messing up because we're human and we're gonna mess up. And so if we kind of get stuck in that, I mess up, now that must mean I'm a horrible person, and gosh, I'm so unlovable. I hear that all the time where we get kind of fused to that idea that if I fail at this, how unlovable that makes me. And so being able instead to kind of shift that of, hey, I mess up because I'm human. And now all of a sudden, we're like, okay, so how can we problem solve this versus, getting stuck in it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that black and white thinking too. You get so stuck and put down on yourself. And something that stood in my mind when you said that too is the reward system. So for some kids, they thrive on a reward system. It works great for them. But for other kids, they may not have the cognitive ability to perform the way you're asking them to perform. And
Yes.
when they can't do it, they feel like they've failed.
Hmm.
So you're giving a reward system for 30 kids when some are very capable and some are like just barely keeping it together, right?
Yeah.
Then those kids that are barely keeping it together are going to get worse and worse and worse because the expectations being put on themselves they can't achieve. And then they
Hmm.
feel they're that bad person. And that's the thing in parenting too, is I have to really take the step back. And I think of, it's a cognitive ladder, is it's a therapy thing. And so cognitive ladder is, we think of a ladder of all the steps. So I think of the top step. Where do I want my kid to get to? I want them to get to all those behaviors for that rewards chart. But if they can't, I need to step down. Well, can they do this? Not yet. So let's put that one rung down. Can they do this yet? Nope, not yet. Let's go one rung down. So you start at the first rung, is where can they be and be
Mhm.
successful?
Yes.
And then you keep moving up those rungs. And that's the thing, is we've been so conditioned as well to think like, at this age they can do this, and this age they can do that, and this age, and it's so different, right? It is so different. They are going to be ahead in some things over other kids, and they are going to be behind in some things with other kids. It doesn't matter the child, they are always going to be, nothing is going to be the same for every age of a child. And that's where, as parents too, it's really hard, because there's these social pressures, there's these norms, these parenting norms, these ways of disciplining that may work well for one of your kids and may not work at all for another kid. And we have to stop and think, okay, what is going on with that kid? Where are they able? Where can I meet them at their cognitive level, at their abilities right now? Like, where truly are their abilities? And this is the hard thing too, as a parent, is to go, oh, my kids' abilities in this are way lower than other kids are right now. You get this shame as a parent. You get this guilt. You get this, well, am I a bad parent? Have I done something wrong? And don't often see that, oh, well, my kid's actually ahead in these other things. Sometimes we then just focus only on the things that they're under and behind on.
Yeah.
And we focus so much on that, and in a way that's not, and not in the lens of, okay, where are they at? Let's think of this like riding a bike. What
Mhm.
step do they actually need? Instead, we try to get them right to the top of that ladder.
Yeah. I'm so curious for you. Has there been any aha moments that have really helped you in navigating that, like you said, that shame and that guilt that sometimes is very, very familiar to parents? You know, parent guilt is a real thing that many of us get really good at giving to ourselves and have that difficulty, kind of like you said, stepping back and being able to kind of maybe have some reframe of that perspective of what our kids can do. And so I'm so curious, like for you, how have you been able to navigate that balance?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I used to be the parent that would judge. I would judge. I used to think, this is how parenting is. This is what you're supposed to do. This is how a child reacts. If they don't act this way, this is what you're supposed to do to them. That I used to oh, I used to judge until I had my son. You're given every child, you're giving your kids for a reason too, right? And
Yes.
I used to judge until I'd be out in public and my child would be yelling at me in the face, like right
Mm,
in my, like, yelling at me. And I'd be like, and I had to do a lot of therapy on myself as well and be okay with me. Parts therapy was actually a huge help for me. And that's my trauma informed coaching, is through parts through IFS. And so with parts therapy, I learned that every time that somebody is reacting a certain way, it's a part of them that's protecting them. It's protecting them usually from the vision of a child. So the reaction that they're having is usually going to be like pretty big or bold or however it is. And you have to stop and think, oh, that's a part kicking up. And as soon as I took the different lens, instead of that child is acting out, that child is misbehaving, that child is not doing what I've asked, I've taken that step back and thought, what does this part want? So a really good example is, there was once that my son was, we were going to Pokemon. He loves Pokemon. It's every Thursday night with his friends, this tournament. It's great. They love it. And he was getting in this tiff. He was just like not getting himself ready, but then getting angry at us, but then saying that he was coming. And so I said to him, I'm like, you don't have to go if you don't want to go. And he's like, that's not what I want. And I'm like, okay. And normally I would have been like, well, you're yelling at me. This isn't right. And I went, ooh, this is a part kicking in. And I'm like,
Yes.
well, so do you want to go? He goes, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay. So I stopped what I was doing, which is also hard to do when you're trying to get out of the house and get them to something on time. And I stopped and I looked and went, okay. So it seems like there's a part of you that wants to go, but a part of you isn't sure about what you want to do when you want to go because you still want it. You don't want to stay home. And he's like, yes. I'm like, okay. So is it that you're unsure about playing, but you maybe want to see your friends? And instantly you saw him calm. And he's like, yeah. And I thought to myself, oh man, he is struggling with the fact that he might lose a game. He's probably had a day that's taxed his whole system. And he's worried about going to play, but he still doesn't want to see his friends and he doesn't want to miss out. So I was like,
Mhm.
okay, well, how about this? We go, we go with your brother. Once we get there, you let me know if you want me to sign you up or not. You go hang out with your friends. You have to let me know by the time they start. And if you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. You let me know when you want to walk home. I'll walk home with you. Your brother's old enough to stay on his own. I'll come back and get him later. He was like, okay, instantly packed up his stuff, totally fine. And we left. And it was that I think was such a big moment for me to see that it's usually parts. There's a reason why they're acting the way that they're acting. We're not always going to know as a parent what the reason is. And we're not going to, like, it's not going to be as laid out as that scenario I just gave. Like, that was an
Mhm.
amazing scenario that actually told me it. But
Yes.
not every scenario works that way with him. Like, I don't always figure it out. But it helped me go through a different lens and be and handle it differently, not judging
Mm.
him. And then you had asked about the guilt and shame. Now that I understand that it's parts in him, it's what he needs. I've gotten to the point too in myself and working on myself that I love myself and my neurodiversities and my ways of being and my differences that I was judged for growing up. And now I'm like, you know what? My kid's awesome. And if people are going to judge me, I know that when I did it before, it was because I didn't understand and I wasn't at that place. So if somebody's going to judge me, it's because they are lower on the cognitive ladder. They're lower on a different step and they're at the step that judges. I've been there, so I can't judge them. At the same time, I'm a few steps higher, which is not said in a judging tone or anything. It's just I've worked to that step. That's
Mhm.
where I am. And that's okay to be there, even if others don't understand it.
Yeah. So it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, just really being able to maybe extend some of that compassion and grace for whatever step and process other folks and yourself are at, and also being able to kind of honor those pieces and know that they are all ways that we can grow, and that for you, it hasn't happened overnight. It sounds like it's come from a lot of hard work, a lot of intentional hard work, to be able to say, this is an area that I want to grow in, and kind of going after that. At the same time, it sounds like being able to offer that same compassion to our children, of saying, like, meeting them where they're at and having that be okay without, like you said, that judgment, but pure, just, it sounds like curiosity of what's going on for you, where are you at, and how can I best support you at whatever step you're in.
Yeah. And I do want to say for everybody listening that that sounds all beautiful and nice and everything. And that's not how it is all the time. I do
Mhm.
yell sometimes. There's sometimes where I do just lose it and I yell. And then afterwards, I have to come back and be like, okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. And there are other times where I will come up to them and go, I'm going to yell at you. And I need you to know I'm going to yell because I've done everything else that I can do in my toolbox right now. And I don't know how else to help you. And I just need to yell and I just need to tell you what's frustrating me right now. And then I'll be done. And I've done that as well. So it's like, it's been funny. And it's so funny because when I do that with my one son, sometimes he actually stops and listens and then is like, it changes his state sometimes, which is funny. So, like, not everything is perfect. Like, it's not what I explained as to how I do approach it. I don't always have the bandwidth to approach it that day, that
Mhm.
way, every single day and every time. And
Yes.
that's okay too.
Mm.
As long as I'm doing my best with the bandwidth that I have on that particular day. If I'm doing my best, then however I react is going to be okay. My kids will be okay. If I totally overreact, if I totally yell at them, and I come back later and say, okay, I'm not having a good day. I'm struggling today. That was not because of what you had done.
Mm.
We need to figure this out. We'll figure it out together, but I can't right now. They're getting used to that too, that I'll come back and talk it through with them. Or I will say that how you were reacting was not okay as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate you kind of making sure to add that this is us right at our best capacity on, a great day.
Right?
And
And
yes, absolutely. Because it's not. And like you said, that it's okay to also um going back to that idea, right? It's okay to mess up, and because we're going to. And parenting is really hard. And I think that if you didn't mess up, I would be asking you, what is your secret? What pill did you take?
and if somebody said they didn't mess up at all, I'd be like, what are you not telling me? Right?
Okay, what's really going on? Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
All right. So as we wrap up, the last question I always love to ask folks that if you had access to a DeLorean, I'm a big Back to the Future fan. Um, is there anything that you would go back and tell yourself as far as anything that you've learned or just giving yourself a little love? What would you offer to yourself if you had
Oh,
access to one?
that makes me tear up because of all the work I've done on myself and all that I've learned about these kids with these cool brains is usually when we have these kids with these brains that struggle to do certain things but are totally in another world with other things, that usually their parents are a part of it, have it as well. So I've now learned that the things that, like, I never lived in a box growing up, and my parents always tried to put me in a box. And I now know that I would go back to that girl and go, like, fly, use your imagination, be you, unapologetically you, you know, it, think outside the box. It's okay that they don't understand it and maybe are fearful of some of your ideas and how deep you dive into subjects. But one day that is going to, I mean, with me, that is going to allow you to get responders back from medical leave and back on the job. That's going to stop some from committing suicides. It's going to stop and help these kids and these parents to do that. So go back and be unapologetically you and live in you and who you are, because you are going to change the world because you are being you with that neurodiverse brain.
I love that so much, and I got goosebumps because it's such a powerful message. Um, and thank you, Andy, so much for being willing to open up and help pull back that curtain and share with us the struggle that is parenting, and
Oh,
also sharing this recipe. I'm so excited to have some and to share with my kids. My kids love a good curry, but we've never had this particular recipe, so I'm so excited to share it with them too. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate you.
thank you so much. Yes.
Yes. And everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. And as Andy said, I hope that this episode helps inspire you to fly and be unapologetically you today. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.